just warning you now, I have nothing good to say about Cats. At all. Nothing. Hey, what's up everyone? Welcome back to Ashley Talks Movies. I'm Ashley and I have another review for you guys. This time I'm doing a review of Cats. And let me just say, I was hesitant to see this film for a number of reasons. Like many of you, I saw the trailer and the trailer looked awful, right? The CGI cats looked like the thing of nightmares and that put me off the film right off the bat. But I can never say a film is terrible if I don't see it. Right? That's not fair. You can't say a movie's bad if you haven't seen it. So I went and saw Cats. Let's just get to the review. Cats is directed by Tom Hooper. He did The King's Speech, which I loved. He also directed Les Mis, which I liked. Not a lot of people like that film, but I actually like that film. Yes, it's a depressing movie, but it's also just a depressing story in general. It's always been that way. So if you were surprised by that, you shouldn't have been. But yeah, Cats is directed by Tom Hooper, and it's a film adaptation of the Andrew Lloyd Webber musical, also called Cats, and it has an all-star cast. Okay, you're talking Judi Dench, Ian McKellan, Idris Elba, James Corden's in this movie, Rebel Wilson's in this movie, Jason Derulo's in this movie, Jennifer Hudson. I mean, there's just Taylor Swift. There's just a bunch of people in this movie. So then it's like, what happened? Because it's bad. It's really, really bad. Like truly horrific. Like horrendous, awful, terrible. All the synonyms for trash would describe this movie. And it's unlike anything I've ever experienced before in my life. First off, as I mentioned, you have this all-star cast in this movie. And it's almost pointless because they're all rendered in this CGI. This movie uses so much CGI. So much CGI. I mean, everything is CGI. Everything. The actors, the sets, everything. And so you have these human faces and these human bodies, but there's CGI fur and CGI whiskers and CGI cat ears and CGI cattails, and it just makes everything look really strange and odd, especially when they're moving or they're walking. It's just visually unpleasant, all of it. Especially when there's close-ups. I mean, there's close-ups of like Jennifer Hudson when she's singing, okay, and you can tell it's her because it's like on her eyes and her nose, but then it's like this weird like feathering with the fur, the CGI render. I don't know. It's not good CGI, and it's overused everywhere. And it just at some points it looks like they're wearing cat suits, but then you can tell it's animated because it doesn't quite move the way it should move. It's awful. It's just so bad. So you have the overuse of CGI, okay? The acting's pretty terrible in this movie, which is very shocking because you have Judi Dench. I mean, just top-notch actors for the most part in this movie. And it's just not good acting. Either people are overacting, like over-emoting, or they're under-emoting, if that's even possible. I mean, you have a great example is, I go back to Jennifer Hudson, who I think is probably maybe the only one in this movie that's not completely terrible, but I can't even really commit to saying that because that would be slightly positive, and I don't really find anything positive in this movie. But she basically just sort of limps around all sulken and over-emotes when she sings, and snot's running out of her nose, and it's like, and it's almost like she's in a completely different movie than everybody else. Rebel Wilson shows up, and it's like a slapstick comedy because she's like falling all over herself, and falling off of CGI couches and dancing around and having, like, saying these really terrible jokes that don't land. And it's just, the acting is so bad in this movie. I don't even understand. There's not even really a story here. And before some people jump into the comments and say, well, it's probably similar to the musical. Yeah, it's similar to the musical. And that leads to another problem I'm going to point out a little later in this review. But there's essentially no story here. There's no plot here in this movie, which doesn't work for a film. Okay, that might work for a musical, doesn't really work for a film. So you literally have, all these characters are introduced. The moment a new cat is introduced, they just burst into song. There's very little dialogue here, almost none. And it just goes from scene to scene, like song to song. Nothing's really set up. I was bored almost the whole time. And I think this movie's under 2 hours, but it felt longer. I just kept going, when is it gonna end? It's not ending. Let me just say that Cats is an experience, okay? It's bizarre, it's weird, it's strange. The best way to describe it is it feels like some kind of fever dream, like a nightmare. Like I was sitting there looking at the screen and being very confused by what I was seeing. And it felt like, I kept asking myself, is this really happening? What is going on? Is this for real? Did they really do this? Did a studio really do this? It's an experience that you can only really understand if you watch the film, which I do not recommend. Like, I do not recommend you watch this film. But it's just weird, and it's odd, and it's strange, but not in a good way. And just the CGI cats, though, guys, I'm telling you, it's just so strange and bizarre how they did that. They spent all this time and money on doing all the CGI for these actors to make them look like cats. And meanwhile, if you're watching and if you're paying attention closely, which I was because there's nothing else really going on in this movie, there's hardly a plot. So I'm just looking at everything. And then you notice, like, their hands are very human-like. And their feet are very human-like. So it just doesn't compute with your brain that you're supposed to believe that these are cats when they're very clearly humans, but like weird CGI humans in cat suits or something. I don't know. It doesn't make sense. So as I mentioned before, this film is an adaptation of the musical, the Broadway musical, which is a stage play. And I think Cats, if it does nothing else, Cats is a perfect example of why some adaptations just don't work for film. They just don't. This works as a musical, for sure. I mean, it's a hit musical. It's one of the longest running musicals of all time. And even then, it's kind of still a strange kind of musical, right? This idea that these cats, meet up yearly, the full moon, to select one cat that will go off into the what's it called, the heavenly something. It's kind of a strange play to begin with, right? But it I think works on the stage because you have the larger than life set pieces, you've got the costumes, the music. It works as a musical on the stage. When you do the same thing in a film, it just doesn't translate. It just doesn't translate. It's all very bizarre. It was all very bizarre. I did not like this film. I think it's one of the worst of 2019. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. The studio would greenlight this and then let that be released the way it was. It's just so true. It's truly terrible, guys. It's awful. Anyway, so if you've seen Cats, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Share your thoughts, good or bad. And please like and share this review. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button.